Well, hello and welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jen Kelly. I'm joined today by Ken, Paul, and Ian. And today we've got a neat episode for you. We're talking about customer interviews and why you need them. Now, these are not customer reviews or customer testimonials, and we'll dive into what the difference is. And this explanation may help. This might be able to let you understand what's different between customer interviews and reviews or testimonials and that kind of thing. So the results of your customer interviews will be their answers, their feedback, and their opinions on what you do well, what you should do better, and why they value doing business with your company. Now, taking this information to heart and adjusting your messaging to reflect what your customers have shared with you will result in clearer messaging about what your company does and how you're different from the competition. And why that's important, like if I asked you today to tell me the difference between your company and your closest competitor, now pick the one that drives you the most nuts, would you be able to clearly articulate your differences? Now, beyond we're cheaper, we're more expensive, we're better quality, we're nicer, like any of those regular things, would you be able to really, really identify what absolutely makes you different? And if you're not alone. And customer interviews may be the process that can help you better articulate your company's differences. So a customer interview is not the same thing as a testimonial or an online review. A customer interview is more than, can you leave us a Google review? Or can you post in our business community about the fantastic job we did for you on that last project? Now, while those reviews and testimonials are important, customer interviews are a different thing and valuable to your company in a different way. And so with that is what we're going to dig into today. Yeah. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand why they're so valuable. And I just think they're pure gold. They really are. They can be that valuable to your company. So with that, Ken, I want to start off with you and ask you the obvious question, but not so obvious. What are customer interviews?
Yeah, so customer interviews, first of all, I think they're really, really important to help you understand more deeply what is motivating people who are deciding to hire your company or buy your products. So ideally, these are best if you have a third party do them. You obviously need to make sure you kind of grease the wheels, so to speak, so that you've got your customer who communicates with their client to let them know, or customer or patient or whoever, to let them know that a third party is going to be contacting them. That's, you definitely need to do stuff like that. But, these are 20 minute interviews. They're really designed to kind of explore and find out why that customer decided to hire or engage with that business. It's we talk about this a lot, where in StoryBrand there's this concept called the grunt test. You go to the website in 5 minutes, in 5 seconds. Can you grunt what it is that business does? Do you know what it is they do? You got 5 seconds. In duct tape, we take the copy from the homepage of the customer we're working with and several of their competitors, with no brand identification assets, just the words that talk about what they do. And then we ask, people, can you pick out which is your homepage? Uh-huh. And we find out pretty frequently that they can't. So you really need to dig into why people are making these decisions. And ultimately you gotta dig into stories of transformation. What are the problems that they had, what were solved, what's their life like afterwards? And when you talk to people independently from what the marketing is projecting, and you learn what the customers are saying, now you can start to work to build, your core point of difference or your unique sales proposition, whatever terminology your marketing bent might want you to use. But it's really core for your differentiation.
Absolutely. What's been some of the reactions when you have all those different? Now, I'm assuming when you say the website, like you cut off the branding, so right. It's just the tagline or the words or the first few sentences that is on the website. What's been the reaction? Can your clients actually find their own messaging?
No, no. I mean, honestly, we've got clients that I don't think ever look at their website, which blows me away too. But But I guarantee you that just because you don't have time or you haven't recently gone to look at your website to see what it has to say, people do care about it, and it influences buying decisions and how willing they are to give your business an opportunity when they're doing, when they're doing their research and reaching out to businesses that they want to do business with, or passing you by. So, it's fascinating to me how many people take what they have on their website for granted.
Mm.
It always blows me away. And to be able to definitively say, yeah, that's ours, um, probably not very often.
Yeah, yeah, which drives home the point of how helpful these are for sure. Paul, why should a company do customer interviews as part of their marketing strategy work?
Well, I want to modify this a little bit. You said, why should a company do customer interviews? And I think it's important. The company itself probably shouldn't do the interviews. They should have a marketing agency or a third party do them, because customers will probably tell a third party something that they would never tell the business. And that is how you get more accurate information. And they should do it. Ken touched on this a little bit, but they should do them or have them done, because you can find out why a customer hired you as opposed to the competition, maybe what did differentiate you from them. And also, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, about maybe what you could have improved on, or maybe their competitor did something that they didn't like or didn't instill confidence, and you address that, and maybe you didn't realize how important that was to a customer. So you can get a lot of information from these interviews that you may not even be aware of, because you get your head wrapped around your own business. And we talk about this a lot of times in content, not to use jargon specific to your industry, because your customers don't know what that is, and you're not going to realize that if you don't talk to your customers. And
Yeah, what were we talking about the other day, Paul? We were talking
God
about.
knows, I've eaten and slept since then.
Yeah, really. I know Tuck Point's always one of my favorites. It's like, who knows to search for Tuck Point, but you can describe the problem you're having for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The stuff between my bricks is cracking. That's probably what somebody's going to look for.
Sure.
And then tuck pointing is going to come up.
Yeah, or brick, or even just brick repair, or
Yeah.
or mortar repair or something like that.
It's good you mentioned that, because I didn't know what you guys were talking about. I thought it was going to be something technical. Actually,
I thought it was plastic surgery.
Yeah. Oh, that's true too. But that's so funny, So have you come up against customers or so your own clients who say, oh yeah, well, we're the number one in this. What do you call it? Let's use your brick example.
Yeah, Tuck
Point.
Point.
Tuck Point.
Mm-hmm.
Tuck Point. Okay, so yeah, we're number one. They call us when they need that, and they're so confident that they know why customers call them. And then the stuff between the bricks is what they actually do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Tuck, if you don't know what tuck pointing is, and that really is a good example, because if you don't know what that is, if someone's searching for tuck pointing, at that point, they know. Well, I mean, if you've done remodeling on your house, like I have, you probably know what it is. Most people don't.
Right.
So most people, by the time they're searching for that specifically, they've gone through a process that you probably don't even realize as a business owner. That's a very bottom of the funnel term. That's not what most people are going to start with. And if you, as a business owner, think that that's what people are searching for, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity at that top of the funnel.
Yeah.
And a massive amount of search volume.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Ian, with these customer interviews, they sound pretty good. They sound like a neat thing that really solve a problem. How do they actually work?
Yeah. So I would say there's probably about 6 steps in order to do good customer interviews. The first is getting the business or the client, our client, so the business owner, on board. So first of all, there's usually questions around, why do we need to do this? We know our customers, we know our industry, we know what works, we know what doesn't work. And then the second question that they need to be convinced of is why you guys should do it versus me and my team. And so we've covered that a little bit, but I think that's going to come up later in this conversation too. So the first is convincing, right? Or winning over the client to understand really the value proposition of an interview. And then the second point I would say is getting the list. And this is kind of a whole thing unto itself, because depending on the business that you're working with, it depends on the industry usually. So you always want to have at least a handful of the best clients, because you want to understand, hey, how do we attract more of these ideal clients or customers for our client? Sometimes they want to mix in some lost business. So, especially on the B2B side, they might want you to interview some businesses that they've lost. And then sometimes we've seen this, especially in kind of the contractor world, the remodeling world, where there's lots of subcontractors. There might be architects, where we've been asked to interview the customers, the subcontractors, and the strategic partners, and sometimes even employees, to really kind of get the whole picture of what's going on and trying to unearth opportunities. The third part of it, I would say, is the scheduling. That's just a very pragmatic. You have to be able to smoothly and easily schedule appointments with these customers and partners. And just as Ken said, they're usually about, they can range from like 10 to 20 minutes. And one of the neat things about that, that I think is an offshoot of this, is that customers feel value. You're actually asking them for their point of view. And that's not done a lot. Obviously, businesses throw out a lot of customer satisfaction surveys, and we want to hear about your testimonials and reviews. But this is a much more personal approach, and I think it actually elevates, or has the opportunity to elevate, the relationship to a new level, because they're kind of partnering with you now, and that's really great. The fourth point I would say is the actual interview. You have to deliver it. You have to get on a call with them. You have to record it. We transcribe the interview so that we actually have a printed version of it that we can, slice and dice. Sometimes we've even thrown the interviews into word cloud, so we could see, oh, here's like common terms that are popping up in all our interviews. What's really neat about these is when you have a third party perform these, one of the reasons you want that is, first of all, you want somebody that's really good at this, that they're disarming, they're a third party, they're not attached to the business. So people will often, just open up, spill their guts, share. And if you're a good interviewer, you will be able to ask leading questions. When a thread appears, you'll be able to follow that thread a little bit further with people. And it is amazing what you can learn, because people will usually be a little bit closed at the beginning, but then once they start to share, and that's just a human tendency, as we start to talk and share, we open up, and especially if it's a comfortable, disarming experience. The fifth is, I don't know if everybody does this, but we tabulate all of the answers into what we would call kind of patterns or themes, or an executive summary. We want to be able to come to our client, the business owner, and say, hey, here, out of all of these interviews, and usually we do from 5 to 15 interviews. It depends on the business again, and kind of the mix. But we want to be able to present them in a very easy to understand way. And usually there are common things, if the business consistently delivers their service or product in a specific way, in excellence, then things will pop up to the surface, and you'll be able to grab those and pop them into your executive summary. And then the final part to a good interview process is just presenting those findings to the business, so that they can dig a little bit deeper with you and and that kind of stuff. And I think, it's always a wonderful experience. I do usually in my agency, I'm the one that does the interviews because I enjoy it so much. I enjoy just talking with people and finding out their experience, and because it's so closely tied to the strategy, it just makes, you know, the strategic part of coming up with the core difference that you guys have talked about, and the messaging, it's right there to be grasped usually.
Yeah, it's important. An important point you said is the interviewer has to be comfortable enough to sort of go with what they hear. It's not a series of 10 questions, even though it very well may be, but they have to be able to listen to, oh, you know, give me an example of that. What do you mean by this? Tell me more about that. Like you're really pulling for, you know, for that information or that story. It's not a series of, okay, great, next question, 6 questions are done, thank you for your time. It's you really got to warm them up and make sure that they feel safe enough to give their, you know, their opinion out there, for sure.
Yeah, it's, I mean we always have a standardized list of questions, right? Because we want, it's almost like when you interview for hiring people into your business, you want to have kind of a common playing field for how you you know, dissect the answers people are giving you. But yeah, it's the bunny trails that you take, you know, when people are talking, or the threads you pull, that I think that's usually where the gold is found. And we've uncovered like service or product opportunities that the customer or our client isn't currently doing because they just never thought about it. They didn't know people kind of put their service and this other service together, and it would make their life easier.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Hey, Ian, so you maybe you covered it, but it didn't really seem to stick with me when you talked about this. How do you make sure that you don't get a biased sample? You know, I mean, obviously we're trying to find their ideal customers, you know, and so we ask for that. But talk a little bit more about how do you work with them to make sure that they're selecting the right people for you to interview in the first place?
Yeah, we've probably talked. Yeah, I didn't really go into that. I think we've talked about this a bit when we've talked strategy and finding ideal customers. Is that you know, when we're coaching our clients on who to choose, if we're doing kind of a minimal interview set, it's always okay. We want a set of ideal customers. So if they can't pick off like who an ideal customer is from their a lot of business owners know, right? It depends on the size again and how many people are in that business. But then we have our matrix, right? If we want to walk people through that of, okay, you're an ideal customer is somebody who is profitable. They have to be profitable because you're a business, right? First and foremost. And you and your team have to like serving them. So that's a very, very simplistic way of doing it. Like there's other approaches to it, but I would say in the very least, you actually do want a biased set because you're trying to bias it to the ideal customers of the business. Again, you can broaden it to include, you know, people that aren't satisfied, right? And that will uncover some things, but that's almost like a different project in a way, because what you're trying, the whole purpose of this is not to uncover problems, it's to uncover how do we attract more of these really, really great customers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely, and our difference. There's one thing in there. So if a client you have is starting a new business, so has never served their ideal client yet before, is it possible? And if so, how would you do it? Is it possible to do these kind of client interviews for a business that has yet to, you know, sell their first product or service?
You could. It's a lot harder because there's no relationship already, right? That's one of the beautiful things about using your client list for that business is that they've already got a relationship. The people that are great customers love that business usually. So they're fans, they're ambassadors of the business. Yeah, it's harder, right? You're almost talking more like a focus group like big businesses do, where you're trying to find people within the demographic that you're trying to attract. I would say kind of a shortcut to that, Jen, is, you know, that's one of the attractions of working with an agency or a marketing consultant who has worked in your industry before, because they're bringing, first of all, the best practices and the intelligence of having worked with other businesses like yours. So sometimes that can be a shortcut. If you have existing customers, I would never shortcut that process. But if you're new, then that agency or consultant can at least say, hey, this is what we've seen in other places. That can be our starting point. Let's say in 6 months, after we've gotten some momentum in your business, let's circle back and interview your best customers then and see if we hit the nail on the head or if we need to refine your messaging slightly. That's my approach that I would do.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. What we've done is we've gone 180 degrees from there and went with, okay, if you're the business owner of this new business, you've had a previous professional life. Some of the same traits that you're going to bring to this business are what made you previously successful. Let's interview those people. What was it like to do business with you when you were doing, ABC or whatever it was, a previous business, coming from corporate into owning your own company? Some of those same positive traits and way you work and way you've worked with teams and way you've dealt with clients in the past, 9 times out of 10 will be the way that you start operating in your new venture. So apologies for not briefing you on this. This came to me as you were talking, and I just wanted to be sure for the audience, if there's folks out there that are just starting up with their new business, this is a possible way to be used in that scenario as well. So
yeah. Can I add one more thing to that, Jen? Sure. Just as you were sharing, the one thing I would say too is that if a business owner who's just starting out, usually they have kind of everybody who starts their own business usually is a technician at heart. They're really good at one particular thing, right? Or a service area or an area of service. But usually they have an idea in their head, like this is what's going to be different about my business. This is how we're going to be unique in the industry, and hopefully it's built into their business plan, right? They've thought about it a little bit, but even that can be a starting point for your core difference, right? You're going to be market testing it in the real world, but that can also be kind of a starting point for messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to change the world with this for sure. Yeah. We all kind of start that way, or some of us start that way. How about that? So Ken, there's so much pressure on this gold that comes out of these interviews. What kinds of questions are the customers asked that produce this wonderful insight?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really, I want to dig to understand the stories of transformation, because ultimately in my mind, that is what marketing is all about is, you've got to be able to transport somebody from a problem or a state that they're in right now to a future state that's highly desirable that they want to get to. And so the questions that, that I really rely on a lot are, what were you looking for? Literally what, it could be, what is the search phrase that you put in, but what were the features or the benefits that you were even looking for? And you can start to explore some of that depending on the nature of the business. What was most important to you? And here's a real important question, because most people make the buying decision based on their internal problem. They do a search based on their external problem. So, so you want to get an idea of what their feelings were. What were they feeling because they had this problem? And if you can answer that and address that, you've got a leg up over your competition. So, what were the challenges you were feeling when you had this problem or you were in this state? Why did you choose, our company versus a competitor? Is there anything that we did that either exceeded or didn't exceed your expectations? Let's see here. I've got a whole list of things. Just trying to. Did we resolve your external problem? So, it's like, let's use an example of roof repair. I've got a hole in my roof because the storm just came through. Did we take care of that problem for you? Okay, great. But I also, when I ask that, I definitely want to make sure that they can answer that. And then I want to explore, how did they feel about the whole process? Were they informed? Was it on time? And this is even, we're not talking about Google reviews today, but Google has even started to ask questions to explore this information to make the reviews even a little bit more differentiating, and so even as part of the interview process, you might want to read reviews to kind of prep to see what other people are voluntarily saying as well. But you got to understand the external problem, which is what they're gonna typically search for, or the reason that they're going to take action. The internal problem that they have is the reason that they make the buying decision and who they decide to buy from. Let's see here if there's anything else
Can you
that.
talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean the internal versus the external?
So let's use the example of the roof. I've got a hole in my roof because the storm just blew through.
I'm sorry.
That's my external problem. Internal problem is, the last time I hired somebody to fix my roof, I just never felt like they did the right job, and it's that feeling, that questioning, unsatisfaction that they maybe have felt from that experience. Yeah, and I want to understand what that is. A dentist is another great, easy example for me. Um, I have a toothache. That's my external problem. It's causing me physical pain. Who do I go to? I'm probably going to select somebody that can answer. If I have a fear of dentists, or I find it to be a painful or really highly stressful experience, if I find somebody when I'm doing my research again, it may be abbreviated because I'm in pain, but if I can find somebody that says, we offer pain-free dentistry, or look, we know coming to the dentist is an uncomfortable situation for many people. Here's how we help you overcome that. If they answer that, that's who I'm going to go to, provided, that I don't have. Now, if you're talking about emergency services, that internal versus external, may not carry as much weight. It may literally be, who is the first person that can come out and stop water flooding into my basement.
Yeah.
But even then, people probably are going to have the opportunity to call a couple of companies, just have them come out and check it out. So yeah, I mean, I really think, exploring that internal versus external problem, and then ultimately try to get them to describe how they feel about the transformation. What was their transformation before I had the hole in my roof? I was worried about my property being damaged. I was worrying how big of a bill it was going to be. When I hired these guys, they came out, they took care of the problem fast. I felt like I was, in charge the whole step of the way. I wasn't at the mercy of them. They kept me informed, and I felt like I was in good control of the situation. And now, I feel good because I know my family's safe, and so if you can get people to kind of tell that story and that transformation, that's gold in my mind. And so that's really what you want to try to do. So yeah, before and afters, I think are really important. I mean, there are probably a dozen questions or so that we kind of have, that we just kind of have as in our go-to. But as Ian said, it's got to be conversational. It's got to flow. You gotta be able to follow those. What'd you call it? The string.
The thread.
Thread or the rabbit.
Yeah, down the rabbit trail. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fair to say none of these questions are yes/no questions, right? They all require several sentences in order to answer them. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's where, I mean, these are different than reviews oftentimes, because sometimes people literally may just say, man, that was a great sandwich. And that's the review. and they're done.
Like your post the other day about the
Yes,
Reuben sandwich,
your-
man. It
yes.
looked delicious.
It was delicious, and I got to give a shout out to Big Woody's. Please do your corned beef more often.
And ship it to Canada.
Yeah, that too. That too. That's funny.
One of the questions that it has just become gold for us, it kind of came out by accident in that at the end of our interviews, we always like to ask, hey, if it seems like it's a case study, or like some form of testimonial that we could, put on a video or create a case study or something, we ask the people, would you be willing to do that? But one of the other questions we like to ask is, do you currently, or have you referred this business to friends, family, colleagues? And if they say yes, I always ask them, well, what did you say? And like that to me is gold, because you actually hear them, because most of them would just be like, well, John is amazing. He did this, and this. And you have to talk to him because there's no better roofer, dentist, whatever, right? And sometimes you hit on some really great keywords as a marketing agency to be able to pull out and go, hey, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, like this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is what and it's good news for the client, because they want to hear that too, because sometimes it doesn't get back to them. Yeah.
Well, and it may actually help them educate other customers, clients, patients that they have on how to refer them too, when they hear it from the words of one of their customers, patients, clients, whatever you call them. But yeah, no, that's a great question. We have that in our mix as well, for sure. And the other thing is, if they hadn't referred, ask why, because that could be an important thing to know.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And it's funny when you say you haven't referred. Immediately, many people may think that's a negative thing. So we've heard, I haven't referred because this product or service is my best kept secret, and I don't want anyone to know I'm getting this type of help for ABC, whatever it is we're doing. Which is, what do you do with that? I mean, that's what a great compliment. We're making you look so good. You don't even want to admit you're getting some help. But on the other hand, it can be, it puts a company in a tough position there as well.
That's a whole messaging platform right there. The best kept secret in roofers.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, Paul, it all sounds lovely. We're talking about all the great stuff, but what happens when the customer or the client is brave enough to answer negatively, to share some negative feedback? Can you talk about how to deal with that, how to turn that around if need be, or how to take that feedback and do something with it?
Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you learn more from your failures than your successes. And if they hired a company and they say, but I wish they would have done this better or this differently, that's a chance to improve your customer service and your customer engagement.
And your close rates.
Yeah, your close rates. So it might be a negative comment from that perspective, but it's really not, because it gives you the opportunity to address an issue that you may not even realize you have. So don't be afraid of it. If someone says something like that's an opportunity for a discussion as well, and for improvement in customer service.
Well, that's a great point, Paul, because like one of the things that we do is, when we create a lead magnet, we have an email nurture sequence, to try to move people to the point where they're ready to make a purchase. And one of the things that we address there is overcoming an objection. And so if you can learn, even if somebody made the buying decision, if they can still tell you one of the things that kind of was an obstacle for them to pull the trigger, but they, fortunately in this case, they obviously did, maybe that's going to prevent a lost sale or a missed opportunity for the next customer, because they may see it as a bigger deal than, the person who made the purchase. So taking that kind of information and incorporating it into your marketing and knowing, these people are great. I wasn't quite sure, because of this. Well, in my mind, you want to eliminate any obstacle you can. And so that's incredibly valuable information.
Yeah, it
And
could
if
be
and
something
if
like,
something
well,
re-
I wound up having to call them because they never responded to the form I filled out on the website. You know, that happens, and that needs to be addressed
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah. Go ahead,
and
Ian.
sometimes you can save a client, right, or a customer,
Mhm.
because if they've been fantastic customers, really happy, and then all of a sudden during, like, at the time of your interview, they might have experienced something negative, you can take that feedback quickly back to the business, and they might be able to win back that customer by taking extraordinary measures, right? So
Yeah.
there's rarely a bad case for doing interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of examples of some negative feedback that we had with a couple of our clients. So one of them was a small law firm, and believe it or not, their major payment, the way that they accepted payment was through check. And some of the feedback was like, "Can I please pay by credit card?" Like, oh my goodness, right? And so, when presenting to the lawyers, they didn't even think about that. They're like, "Oh my God, of course!" Like, boom, done. Like if
Yeah.
that's negative feedback, no problem. We'll get that, we'll get that in place. Another was a mortgage broker who like locally here, quite famous, has a whole team of mortgage brokers. And the feedback was, we came to this, I guess this organization because we wanted the superstar to deal with us, and instead we got a worker. And like, what does it take to get the superstar to work with us? And so and when that was brought back, it was kind of like, oh, okay, is there a way we can message? So if you want the superstar, you're on this track. If you want any of the team, we're on this track. Do we have to message that the team is just as good as the superstar? That's why they're part of, this person's team. Or, if you do want that superstar, experience, let's just say, does that mean, maybe you're waiting a little bit longer in order to get your work done, or maybe you pay a little bit more? But certainly the messaging about like the choice or the expectations of coming to have your mortgage done by this firm, it wasn't even considered before, and not in a negative way, but like, hey, we're trying to get this done for you. So there's a couple of examples there, which, it's not the end of the world for the business. It's a chance to, and with these two examples, had no idea this could have been an issue, right? Just weren't even thinking about it. So
Yeah.
very, very important. Ian, we've touched on this a little bit about the third party and how people spill their guts to strangers and whatnot, but could you talk more about the importance of it? Because it could sound like the marketing agency just wants, to be in on everything that's going on. What's so important about a third party doing this type of work?
Yeah. I covered some of this. I just to expand on it a bit more. I think first of all, having a third party do it, and if they do it right, they have a good interviewer, right? An interviewer that understands just what Ken was saying, where what we're trying to uncover is the transformation that's taken place and how we can communicate that as a core difference and also uncover opportunities, right? And so, that's really important. So it's kind of this strategic mindset, because that will actually lead to different questions sometimes, depending on the journey the conversation takes, and how you draw that out. Some people are good at drawing out answers. Other people are not as good at it. I think that leads into kind of the second point, that if you're in the business, if you're a business owner, a salesperson, customer service, reception, whatever it is, you have too much at stake in these interviews emotionally, right? Because first of all, it might stop people from being authentic and sharing the truth. And that's horrible, because that kind of deflates the whole purpose of this endeavor. The other side is that if somebody says something and the interviewer in the business becomes emotional about it, even if it's just internal, they might have a good game face, poker face, but if internally they're kind of all rankled up, it's going to affect how that conversation continues, because they can't be kind of a dispassionate third party just going, oh, okay, well, that's too bad. Because you guys were talking about negative answers.
Yeah.
There's leading questions that come out of those negative answers where we want to dig deeper, because it might not be enough information to be able to take back to the client. And yeah, the third point is really, I think people open up differently to kind of a stranger, a neutral party. You're almost like a mediator between the business and their customer. And I think it just drops down some barriers and people just open up more. Again, it depends on the person, but that's what you hope for. And if just whatever, if the business owner were to interview me, I would probably soften my answers because I didn't want to hurt their feelings, right? Because that's who I am. I care about the person.
Yeah.
I especially if it's like your dentist and they're going to be in your mouth next week or something, right? Like, I am not getting this person upset. I'm going to be nice to them.
That's right.
Or if they're working on my car as a mechanic or something,
leave those brakes alone.
Yeah, I don't want them thinking negative thoughts the next time they're working on my car.
Yes. So good. Very true. Anybody else have any input on the third party, talking to strangers, spilling our guts to those that don't know us?
Not really.
Not really. Yeah.
The last thing that kind of came to mind when you were asking others was just we because we do this all the time, right? We have the tools to do the recording, the transcription, the Zoom, setup, whatever it is. So that's just a very practical part that most businesses probably wouldn't easily have set up, and so they're going to fumble with it a little bit more.
Yeah, the logistics of it for sure. Yeah, and the end results. I always we have all of the positives on one page, and then all of the either negatives, challenges. However it works best for the client with the vocabulary. And I always tell them, the positive, piece of paper, stick that in your desk and pull that out one day when you're not feeling so great, because it's all the wonderful things about what you do or how you do it and that kind of thing. So
yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you have your marketing company that you're working with do it, we also do it with forethought in mind of what we can take and use and reuse as assets for the rest of your marketing. Not just distilling it down into a clear message, but like I said in the email nurture sequence, this is a great objection. Let's talk about how we overcoming this objection and part of our email nurture series. Or these are ideas that we can get for a video series, or content we need to put on our website, frequently asked questions. I mean, so whereas if you're in the business, you may not be thinking about those things. So you may capture some great information. Like Ian said, I think you're going to get it somewhat filtered, but you're probably not going to be able to take full advantage of what you got either. And you really can get gold. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. To wrap up, do any of the three of you have an example of a before and after story that you'd like to share about doing the client interviews, customer interviews? If not, I have one in my back pocket, but
I'm happy to share one.
Okay, please do.
So I had mentioned earlier about how we did one for a remodeling business, and they wanted us to interview their strategic partners as well as their customers. What was really, really interesting was they actually came to us to do a strategic plan for them. But the thing that really got them excited was the core difference, because they just felt that the industry was just vanilla. Every remodeling business in the city was talking the same way and the same thing. They all had similar pictures of fancy looking places and their taglines were similar. But it became so clear through our interview with their customers, like their subcontractors, their strategic partners, like everybody was saying the same thing. Like they all had different viewpoints, but they were all saying the same thing. I'm not going to say what it was because it could help another remodeling business in that city. but it was so fascinating that when we took those findings, we created a core difference, we shared it with the client, like it just immediately resonated with that remodeling business team, because they were like, yeah, that's who we are and that's what makes us unique. We just could never drill it down to that, and that it was supported by experiences and data from the marketplace is what gives it validity, right? It's not just a business coming up with the idea by themselves. It's, wow, this is what our customers, our strategic partners, and our subcontractors are all saying. And what was really cool about this, the subcontractors and strategic partners, is that they work with a host of remodeling people that are competitors to these guys, right? And so that was where it was really eye-opening too. It kind of gave us a three-dimensional cube to rotate around and go, okay, this is what clients are saying, this is what strategic partners say, and this is what subcontractors say. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of common themes in there that we were then able to take and make a really great core difference that isn't just a tagline. It's messaging that's gonna, Ken was talking about how, videos, blog posts, follow-up emails, like it's part of their brand messaging that's going to be through everything now. So that was a really cool one to see.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, mine isn't really a direct result of that, but what it did is it helped us communicate the importance of a differentiating statement, and to help frame what we needed to try to communicate. So it was less about what we learned from the customer interviews. It was really just the process that we did it. Kind of made it possible for us to really have that deeper conversation. And we've talked about this before. The elements of value pyramid is such a great document to just refer back to. And in this case, we're working with a high-end home remodeling contractor, and you're really looking at something that's aspirational. And so moving the needle from just saying we do this to talking about the aspirational transformation that somebody wants to attain, just makes you stand out so dramatically. And so it was really just it was kind of a derivative of the process of just doing interviews that kind of got us there. The message kind of fell in place. It wasn't anything that was really uncovered during the process, but because we did the process, it was, I don't know, I don't know if I'm making sense, but sometimes just doing something yields unexpected results.
Absolutely. Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, I don't know if it's not really before and after, because I don't think we've shared it with the client yet. But we have but it talks to the value of doing these interviews, because we have a client that has a very expensive high-end product, and I found this out after the fact. I have a friend that was looking at this product, and they went with a competitor, and because they're friends of mine, I was like, well, okay, we have a client that does that, and they had talked to them, and I said, so why did you go with this other company? And they said, well, it really came down to the follow-through, and they made us feel more comfortable about spending this amount of money for this. So that's something. How would you ever find that out if you don't do these interviews? And I mean, it wasn't a pre-planned interview. It just happened to be a friend of mine that was looking for this particular product and went with a competitor. And because it was a friend of mine, I just asked them, and they said, well, this is why. And it wasn't a competency thing. They just, the follow-up was better. They were spending thousands of dollars here, tens of thousands of dollars, and they made us feel more comfortable.
Wow.
Internal problem.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. The feeling. My goodness. Great. Well, that has been a great conversation about this topic. So I think we should wrap up. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Now, each of the Marketing Guides businesses are set up to perform customer insights interviews as part of their strategy first work. So contact any of them for more information on this important part of your marketing strategy. And if this podcast has been helpful to you, please share the wealth with others, telling them about it. And until next time, thanks so much. We'll see you again.
See you.